The Obama Factor, Redefining Possibility. It was the weekend before Tuesday's general election. Riding shotgun in a Chrysler 300, I flipped through a list of registered voters in Indianapolis public housing. My mom, an official Obama volunteer, was taking her fourth trip to Indiana, our neighboring red state, a state that had voted Republican in the presidential election for the past 30 years, but with Obama fever now had a serious blue leaning. Because of Indiana's close proximity to Illinois, its closing factories prompting many to rethink their Republican loyalties, its 500,000 new voters, and its impressive get-out-the-vote efforts in northwest Indiana, the Obama campaign was asking Chicago area volunteers to hit I-80 and seal the deal. The same weekend, my younger sister Veronica was boasting on how she was hopping medians in Heritage, Virginia, with some friends posting Obama signs along the road. While a great deal of my work was some spirited blogging, I figured it was time to step away from internet politics and do some field work. My mom, who in her free time was either working local Obama phone banks, mailing Obama postcards, or buying the latest Obama paraphernalia, had become a de facto campaign rep for friends, family, and associates, and had recruited me with a car chock full of foil-wrapped turkey sandwiches, fruit, and Obama stickers. My mom and I pulled up to our destination. Clad in all black and leather jackets, we looked like smiling New Age panthers and total outsiders, which is why we were spotted among the flock of sunny Midwest volunteers who flooded the Indianapolis headquarters and asked to canvass the city's housing projects. So outdoor hopping we went. Frankly, the all-black residents were shocked to see us, and smiles crept across their lips as it became evident that this campaign did not take their vote for granted. Some residents needed rides to the polls, most needed clarity on early voting locations and poll sites. Others wanted assurance that their vote would count, and the fever spread. Newly registered teens wanted to rock the stickers I gave them on their hoodies. The single moms wanted stickers for their toddlers' Tonka trucks. A few wanted to post them smack dab on their apartment door. It was one of those rare moments I knew I should crystallize for my kids' and grandkids' sake. While my parents could tell winding tales about their memories of King's I Have a Dream speech, 1960s campus protests, or a spirit-raising election or two, my greatest "where were you" moments had to do with hip-hop songs, 9/11, and a Sox championship. Professor Michael Eric Dyson talks about something called cultural amnesia, illustrating that the so-called hip-hop generation has turned, in absence of massive protests or epic civil rights battles, to pop culture for its civic barometer. It's a default mechanism. We have no common memories of socially important events and causes that don't just symbolically reenact the achievements of previous generations. So instead, we are infused with a love affair for pop culture and armchair news analysis. Gen Xers may not have clear memories of where they were when the Berlin Wall fell, when the Gulf War under Bush the First began, or when welfare was dismantled. But we do remember our inaugural listen to ditties all about the Benjamins, College Week in Cancun, when Tupac was murdered, Atlanta's senior year, Clark Atlanta University, and when we heard that Honey Magazine, a mag for black women hipsters, closed its doors. New York City Tao Restaurant. On the other hand, I don't remember when I first used the defining technological devices of the past decade. I doubt they rank as even fuzzy memories for my peers either. My aunt had found stories fit for fireside chats about when she first saw color television. When did I first use the internet? When did I send my first text message by my first BlackBerry? I don't have a clue. This isn't to make light of my generation and the challenges of the postmodern world. our politics or empathies, but it is to say that the scope of our idealism was chain-locked to our money-making aspirations or the candid inspiration from a top 40 hit. Few, if any of us, expected our politicians to be more than self-serving hams who sold out their constituencies on the regular. But our jaded outrage was limited to heated conversations at house parties, in chat rooms, and on cell phones. Some took jobs and adopted personal missions to empower the unempowered. Others crammed their days with an assortment of volunteer and civic activities. However, we relegated our idealistic nostalgia to symbolic gestures, rocking a peace sign on a pair of jeans, wearing an afro for old time's sake, donating canned goods and coats on Christmas, or reading Oprah's book of the month. At best, we volunteered, voted, went green, or put our dollars behind the latest worthy cause. But we knew this wasn't enough. So Obama's candidacy was the first major grassroots political effort the most Gen Xers and Yers could participate in that resonated on the national level with anything remotely reminiscent of the civil rights movement of the past. Sure, some of us were part of the Free South Africa efforts and others walked in the Million Man March, Jena 6 protests, Sudan crisis awareness campaigns, or anti-war demonstrations. We gave money and clothes to Katrina victims and to the tsunami victims in the Pacific. But for the most part, there was no national cause to rekindle the idealism of my peers. Certainly none that received mainstream coverage, and no proverbial lightning rod to get it started. So where was I minutes before Obama was predicted to win the election? In a nervous effort to stay calm in case the inevitable did not happen, was racing up the Dan Ryan Expressway to my mom's Obama party downstairs, trying to dodge Millennium Park traffic on the Chai while stressing how I was going to attend the other 5 Obama celebration parties I was invited to and still get back south to pick up a friend who wanted to tag along. I was also firmly focused on thinking about anything but the possibility of a McCain win. It was oddly warm, nearly 70 degrees on what would typically be called a snowy day. With visions of the never-ending 2000 election in my head, in which the final count was several days late and stymied with a politically tinged Supreme Court decision, I figured I wouldn't be a winner until at least 2 a.m., enough time to zigzag through the city and avoid the what-if mind chatter of an Obama loss, which, with all the hype and sheer revelry, I simply couldn't entertain. But electricity sent shockwaves through the air. Those afraid to show too much enthusiasm began to actuate the facade of pessimism, and others were gestating bundles of glee, waiting for a victory they'd already claimed. I hopped out of the car, sashayed through the winding lobby, and up the elevator prepared for a never-ending night. However, by the time I walked the hallway to my mom's suite, I could hear beaming cheers. Perhaps Obama had won a swing state, Indiana hopefully, or maybe someone had told a really funny joke. So when I opened the door and saw the CNN news flash predicting Obama the winner, my eyeballs were glued to the screen. Somebody hurriedly shoved a plastic champagne flute in my hand, with the exception of my mom, who was flitting about like Tinkerbell. The rest of us partiers were Old Testament pillars of salt, and stunned by the magnitude of hope realized. I think we glowed. It felt like the planet shifted. It was a fundamental mental flip. A stratospheric ceiling was busted. Old mindsets stomped to smithereens. Hope, the North Star for dreamers, mired in the muck of reality, had finally made good on the promise. Obama won. He won definitely. Had I ever stood witness to this change of magnitude? Have I ever seen national hope resurrected? I don't think so. For weeks leading up to the election, the nervous possibility of America's first African-American president became the cooling mist in the political fire. Trepidatious pragmatists became jittery believers. Longtime supporters waved Barack banners like cheerleaders, and staunch antagonists watched in disbelief as the impossible. A black man in the presidency teetered on the cusp of reality. I was pretty sure Obama would win. If I'd had any doubts, that 4-hour early voting line I stood in gave me a hint of victory. With a warm throng with water cooler comedians for entertainment, the motley crew of African Americans lining the halls of all at Harvey Community College spanned every walk of life. They waited patiently, albeit nervously, to cast their history-making vote. Passerbys over the month had made a lot of biblical parallels with the election, comparing the 40 years it took the Jews to get from the wilderness to the Promised Land to the 40 years between Martin Luther King's death in 1968 and the pending 2008 Obama election. Even Obama himself joked at the Catholic Charities roast that he was not born in a manger, as some said, but rather on Krypton. Even the more cynical voters felt there was something uniquely different about this election. After the Jeremiah Wright fiasco, nasty Obama versus Clinton primaries, and the Palin obsession, people were sick of politics as usual. Top that off with a hellacious economic downturn, a housing market crash, and mass layoffs, and change was more than a notion. It was a lifeline. Haterism matters. A black man will never become president was reiterated as often as knock knock guess who in the black community. It doubled as both a commentary on the nation's racist underpinnings and a troubling reminder that no matter the level of education and success a person of color could reach in the United States, race would always be his or her greatest hurdle. But the statement was repeated so frequently, half jokingly, half cynically, that it spoke to a widespread unwillingness to believe otherwise. Despite the presidential bid of Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, and others, the possibility of victory seemed distant. Institutional racism would continue, blacks would always be among the have-nots, and the only way to amass political clout was to hobnob with, be knighted by, or be the pupil of heavyweights who would never let your ambition supersede theirs. And the possibilities of what it meant to have an African American president can be explored only if you accept that an African American can in fact become president. P. Diddy himself, an entertainment mogul and business whiz, admitted that as a kid he wanted to be president, but he never shared it with anyone because he knew people would laugh. America at large didn't think it was possible. While many people wanted Obama to win, the only person besides Obama himself who absolutely knew he would win seemed to be Oprah, who in a light-heartening epiphany boldly suggested he run long before Obama appeared on the national political radar. The impossible dream in black circles spoke to a fear to believe, a fear of disappointment, and a fear of backlash, all rooted in the willful disappointments of the past. The assassination of King, the Kennedys, and Medgar Evers, the lynching of liberators, the blackballing of freedom fighters, the character assassination of those who bucked the system. While these events were some 40 years removed, the memories loomed like London fog. Couple with them in unjustified war, police harassment, driving while black, housing discrimination, job discrimination, the inability to get loans, and systemic crime in urban areas, all routine problems that weren't sexy enough for news coverage and typically got shoved under the mass consciousness rug. If that undercut current didn't boil the blood, the hellacious federal response to New Orleans, while the nation watched an American city and its poor black citizens drown for days, was a disturbing reminder that race still mattered. Hundreds of thousands of voters punched yes for change. But what that change meant with regard to race was riddled with as much fear as it was hope. For the record, some African Americans weren't ready for progressive change, in whatever form it took. And if they were, they certainly didn't want Obama to lead it. I don't have a problem with people choosing to vote as they please. Voting is personal. Blacks are not obligated to vote for black candidates and aren't obligated to express allegiances to him or her if the candidate is not qualified. The Clintons had initiated a number of progressive policies and cultivated a strong relationship with African Americans during their political tenure. John Edwards, too, was an upstanding candidate who fought for the working class. A vote for any of them was not a cataclysmic setback, but as the candidates announced their bids, a large number of blacks who favored Clinton or Edwards weren't pointing to the virtue of their policies over Obama's. Ever clear-cut Clinton allegiances due to past commitments would have made sense in arguments. Congressman Charles Rangel of New York, for example, referred to Hillary Clinton as New York's favorite daughter. As part of the New York Democratic Party circle, his support of hers was logical, as was the support of other political heavyweights. But these were not the arguments that black Clinton supporters used. The primary reason was that the scuttlebucking itself on talk shows and email blasts and chat rooms could be whittled down to the "who the hell does this black man think he is" factor. Other arguments, like he's too inexperienced or too young, were just bullet points for the former. The first reason for annoyance with Obama's bid seemed to be his lightning-quick rise. The self-proclaimed black gatekeeper, who had praised his senatorial bid, were highly suspicious of his quest for the presidency. Call it crabs in a barrel, jealousy, or ill-placed rage, but some influential people of color were piping mad that Obama even thought he could be president. Their biggest beef being some invisibility hoop of black political credibility he hadn't hopped enough. Is he black enough? It became the Black Talk Circuit discussion of the month. A virtual bird with no wings, the argument fell flat because none of his critics could explain what being black meant. Nor did they see the irony in charging that a black person voting for a black man with a solid voting record for a president made them sellouts. The most famous black critic on record was Tavis Smiley, a longtime national talk show host who had positioned himself as an advocate for issues facing the black community. Smiley was uncharacteristically critical of Obama. He blasted Obama for not appearing at Jena 6 protests, for not appearing at the Black State of the Union televised vehicle that Smiley created, and for a widespread failure to discuss black issues on the campaign trail. What became as mild critical analysis soared to the level of haterism as it became evident that Smiley just flat out didn't like Obama's audacity to hope that he could hold the highest office in the land. From an observer's view, it seemed almost personal, as Smiley hammered on Obama day after day in radio segments, chipping away not at his policies or politics, but at Obama's blackness. Email chains forwarding Smiley's anti-Obama rhetoric became blogger fodder. And talk about being on the wrong side of history. But Smiley was just the most visible naysayer, a stance he paid for when radio listeners and TV viewers flooded him with letters denouncing his unfounded disdain. But there were others, some famous, some not. At a meeting of African American journalists and political strategists, I attended the onset of Obama's candidacy. Each political strategist on the panel was frightening anti-Obama, a shock to the eager audience. But their anger wasn't related to his policies or platform, but rather to the fact that even he thought he was qualified. The criticisms were downright nasty. Here you have credible, accomplished political strategists resorting to race and colorism. idioms to again question the issue of blackness. What kind of black man raises that kind of money? I'd question any black man who whites are so willing to support. He has a little bit of white in him, and you know what that means. What? It was the most disheartening panel I'd ever attended, and a resounding "what decade is this?" echoed in my head. The strategists rambled on and on, tossing one backward-coded color comment after another while basking in the glow of Hillary Clinton's political halo. I couldn't figure out which angered them more, the fact that Obama was running or the fact that he hadn't chosen any of the panelists in question to be on his team. But in retrospect, who would choose this bunch of malignant critics to be part of his or her campaign of change? In another instance, I overheard a conversation among self-designated glitterati on the day Obama announced his presidential bid. The conversation was mostly anger-filled commentary stating that Obama better remembered he's ours. I assumed that he'd better not make another move without consulting them in his progress, which made me wonder, why the heck would I have to consult them to do anything? This group of anti-Obama African Americans was oddly vocal, hopping from one radio station to the next, belittling his nerve to run. They were so vocal that the mainstream media came under the illusion that the black community had split down the middle before the primaries, but it hadn't. The split only existed among the ranks of visible pundits. Obama's Iowa primary was squashed much of this chatter, with fence hoppers figuring that if all white Iowa could vote for him, surely Chicago's South Side, Watts, and every other black urban and rural pocket could. But the mumbling continued, the mainstream media picked up on it, and the highly hyped question in the early days of the primaries was, will blacks vote for Obama? Which led to disturbing nightly news discussions on Obama's black credibility. Can the average black person vote for a biracial Ivy Leaguer? Is Obama too professional for the black working class? The analysis was absurd and made the faulty assumption that black people were mostly working-class idiots who resented educated people at their own expense. All eyes turned to South Carolina to get the pulse of the black voter. Would they go with Clinton or Obama? The argument was irritating to say the least. A girlfriend and I were drinking margaritas at a Mexican restaurant days before the South Carolina primary when a very sad Puerto Rican guy pulled up a seat behind us. He was devastated, he said, because he just didn't understand why black people wouldn't vote for Obama. Where did you get that from, I asked, knowing good and well his assumption came from the glut of cable news stories using hearsay and racial stereotypes to deconstruct the black vote. When we reassured him that Obama would win South Carolina hands down, he just shook his head in sorrow. Why don't black people like Obama? He seems like such a nice man. He was nearly in tears. Our attempts to cheer him up were fruitless, and he wandered back to the bar for another round. Obama did win South Carolina, and the "is he black enough" question was silenced and trumped with the even more controversial "is he too black?" with critics pointing to his affiliations with the Trinity Church of Christ and now notorious Reverend Jeremiah Wright, whose black theology and the adoption of Christianity as a symbol of the disenfranchised toppling the establishment had become front-page news. Wright had been analyzed enough. His "goddamned America" quip was worse than the Chinese drip torture the way it was hashed and rehashed. The video was omnipresent, replayed like a winning touchdown on cable news. Wright's defense at the press club was downright confusing as he played into the hands of Obama's competitors. But the collective media focus flip of "Is Obama black enough? Is he too black?" in less than a week was one of the greatest turnarounds in political history. Obama had to refuse and deny right. He had to refute and deny Louis Farrakhan a later day rite of passage for every black politician on the national stage. Obama was linked to Bill Ayers, a 1960s radical who bombed federal buildings in political protest and later went on to become a respected professor. "I don't think I should be blamed for something a man did when I was 8 years old," Obama said. If baptism by fire via the right fiasco wasn't enough, the next attempt to play up Obama's blackness turned his knack for public speaking into a flaw. Since Obama's Democratic Convention speech in 2004, he's been heralded as a riveting speaker. His ability to inspire large crowds with rousing speeches, speaking to the chorus of democracy and aspirational, frightened competitors, while this ability to touch the hearts of masses was lumped down by critics as nothing more than mesmerisms, his political aptitude was minimized to mere speech-making. Obama was not a skilled civic leader, but rather an orator in the vein of Jackson, Sharpton, King, and Wright, in the league of black preachers and politicians at large. The word orator was increasingly used by TV pundits and became doublespeak for black, as to say, "Well, they all give good speeches, but what do they do? He gives such nice speeches," pundits sneered. Oratorical skill, a talent widely respected in black communities, which have a penchant for preachers, politicians, and spirited teachers, was knocked. But the biggest haterism moment came when Jesse Jackson, former presidential candidate hero and longtime mouthpiece for Black America, was caught on mic on the news calling Obama the N-word and remarking that he wanted to, in so many words, castrate him for giving speeches on absent dads to black audiences. The action cost Jackson a speech at the Democratic Convention, clouded his legacy, and, despite Obama's public forgiveness, forged a wedge between the two biggest black heroes in the political sphere. It trumped Clinton's racially tinged off-the-cuff reference to Robert Kennedy's assassination. Pick your poison: castration or assassination. Atlanta Congressman John Lewis, a staunch Clintonite, switched his vote to Obama. A civil rights leader who went on to politics, Lewis said he couldn't let this moment pass without doing what was right, and he went on the record to say so. Today, few people in black circles will say that they did not vote for Obama or even question voting for him. Any criticism of Obama could get you stonewalled. Palenism. So Obama went from being unqualified to not black enough to too black to a terrorist sympathizer before snagging the Democratic nomination. The Republican Party's torpedoes upped the ante, making Obama not just a terrorist sympathizer, but a terrorist himself. Obama was labeled un-American, unpatriotic, and Republican-friendly internet bloggers charged that Obama wasn't American at all. This was followed by charges that his policies were socialist, and 2 weeks before the election, in a throwback to U.S. history class, the term communist was hurled. Obama was a red-blooded communist. I can't remember the last time communism was used as some red flag word, outside of scant references to China and Cuba to rile the American public. Again, what decade did they think it was? I don't know what their logic was in bringing Governor Sarah Palin on as their Republican vice presidential nominee. It's incredibly multifaceted. Senator John McCain's maverick status received a booster shot when he was praised for taking the gamble of a lifetime with a fresh conservative unknown from Alaska with some system buckling of her own under her belt. Initially, Palin's selection bolstered hopes of securing these women who had supported Clinton. Some speculated that she matched Obama's soul-stirring charisma, looks, charm, while others pointed to her hockey mom stats and blue-collar background as rousing the working-class Republican base. If nothing else, her meteoric rise and fall in a hair-raising general election campaign was a puzzling distraction from the real issues. It was a blogging zealot fast-forwarding to keep up with the daily Palin foibles. The Katie Couric interview, Saturday Night Live satires, and internet gossip with an eye-gluing attention usually reserved for reality TV or Desperate Housewives. At Halloween, adults donned Palin wigs and glasses. Signs at the Republican convention proclaimed a hot VP from a cool state, but touting her as a feminist or advocate for women's rights in right of her anti-choice and anti-equal pay for women was laughable. Her ignorance of international affairs and domestic issues snowballed into a serious problem for McCain, with more attention devoted to her media escapades than to McCain's message. As Obama's lead solidified for the days leading up to the general election, Palin was blamed for the loss. Transition dynamics. The possibility of an Obama presidency became real. Some rushed to shape the dialogue on the election's meeting. The most obvious assumption based on the black man can't become president logic is that if one does not make it to that rank, presuming he won't be killed, the other half to the downward twist, then racism must be over. So out came a steady wave of speakers and pundits on black talk radio who wanted to reassure black America that if Obama did win, don't get too excited because racism still exists. Among the larger fears was the possibility of the dismantling of affirmative action. If Obama won, would the country abandon all affirmative action and diversity initiatives? Affirmative action had taken a steady beating for nearly a decade, with universities and companies slowly rolling back measures and charging that affirmative action was discriminatory to white men. The U.S. Supreme Court held affirmative action in the nation's universities. But even beyond the need for affirmative action, I wondered if any of the fearmongers had entertained the idea of a day when the government actually lived up to the Declaration of Independence's right to the pursuit of happiness. That far-off day when everyone did have equal access, and if they did win, we wouldn't need it at all. What if some magic wand action in Obama presidency ended institutional racism? Then what? The notion seemed equally as troubling, and no one wanted to talk about it. Black power in a new age. Since the 1970s, the issue of black empowerment has been rooted on the strength of longtime black institutions, businesses, churches, and agencies. Power was amassed through new political might in cities and governments, rising power brokers in corporate America. While the Black Power movement was never exclusionary or specifically anti-white, it was oriented to counter racism. But as power structures merged and political and economic strength grew and splintered, interest grew and centralized as well. With Obama's history in the making, I wonder how this concept will morph. The focus of black power reportedly shifted from civil rights to financial empowerment. But is there another frontier, or is the concept itself riddled in ideologies with shifting relevance? At the heart, that's what this post-black concept explores. How much of our identity is a summation of countering racism, and how much of it is authentically us? Not that the two can't coincide. Cultural pride is a source of personal empowerment, a building block for pride, a blueprint for change. But it is this time of shifting identities, personal responsibility takes an upswing that bodes both incredible promise and awesome fear. The question, who are we, could very well be replaced with who am I? And where do personal pursuits of peace and happiness and the pantheons of cultural responsibility and empowerment? Returning to Du Bois's double identity, being black and American is one thing, but being black and an individual is something else, and these individual pursuits change the social fabric. The definition of being black or African American will evolve as well. Being black unfolds as we unfold. The next tier of evolution is arguably for the first time solely and totally up to us. It's no longer funneled and distorted by debilitating institutional racism. That can be worked around. It's no longer couched solely by life experiences and the rigors of the Deep South or the Hood, although they have influence too. It is as worldly and as isolated as we make it, as mass-produced or indie as we choose, as commodified as we allow it to be. No, while we aren't at the helm and media everywhere, our voice, more than ever before, can be our voice. President Obama, who embraces most of the non-traditional African-American factors referenced in this book, campaigned for change, but also serves as a symbol of these new integrated ideas and how they play themselves out in the world stage. Is he the new black? Much like saying black is blue. Besides sounding trite and trendy, such notion implies that blackness is a perception that can be commodified and altered at will. But there's nothing invested, at least for African Americans, for blackness to be a painted mirage either. And President Obama, while symbolizing many things for many people, is a man elected by the people and who makes decisions that affect the world every day. But the question is, what does this mean? Does it mean I can do anything? Does it mean I can be anybody? Does it mean the sky's the limit? Does it mean I can make change? These are the values put before African American kids and American kids in general. If you work hard and work smart, you can do anything in this country. But we fear to believe this despite those stellar many who did. If I can make any conclusion about an Obama presidency, it's that the fear and its basis have been removed. And what does that mean? It means that when we say you can do anything, it's not followed by a but clause. It means you can, in fact, reach your highest possibilities. While I canvassed the Indianapolis projects, there were a few toddlers playing outside of a woman's home while we were passing out Obama for President stickers, and my mom mashed one on a little kid's plastic truck. The kid, no more than 4, looked at the sticker and pedaled off as far as he could, which was no more than a door or two down, before his mom called him to turn around and ride back. What would his world be like? What opportunities would he see that defy his situation and surroundings? All of this we come to see, and I welcome the revelations.